Okay. Well, yeah. Mm-hmm. Elena, pose with the turtle. Let me get you on film. Yeah, go around the turtle. Thank you. All right. No. No, fuck you. Not right. Oh shit. Well, this son of a bitch is right, I guess. Oh shit. What is it recording? Well, you fucking ass. No, you don't record. Mm.
On Mars, but we didn't rule out larger bodies of water. It now appears that indeed there were oceans on Mars. We see the evidence for that. That's a truly remarkable result. Okay. Then this afternoon, of course, we're going to have many track talks of different technical subjects that are on the agenda, and also the steering committee meeting will take place. And then this evening is the banquet, which you're all urged to attend. So, our first speaker of the morning will be Dr. Buzz Aldrin. That is, Buzz Aldrin, in addition to being a colonel in the Air Force, was also has a PhD from MIT in astrodynamics, and was the first to work out the techniques for orbital rendezvous, which he then first demonstrated as an astronaut in the Gemini program. Then, of course, Buzz piloted the landing of the first human landing on another world, Apollo 11. And in distinction from essentially all the other Apollo astronauts, the thing that is truly remarkable about Buzz, in addition to all the accomplishments that I've already named, is that he is the one who realized that the important thing about Apollo was that it was opening up a new chapter in human history, and that it would only be truly important for humanity if that is what it served to do. And so, since that time, quite literally, Buzz has been tireless in promoting the vision of a human spacefaring future. Okay, so that Apollo would not simply be a remarkable chapter of things that happened in the 1960s that we could all look back on and say, gee, cool things happened in the presence in other worlds. So today, Buzz is actually going to talk to us about his views on what is required to establish a sustained human presence on other worlds. And without further ado, Buzz Aldrin.
Bravo.
Well, I understand I was here to make sure that a lot of people get up early in the morning. How many got up this morning to see the meteor shower? Okay. Wasn't very spectacular. Either that or I was late getting to the roof of my building. I want to really acknowledge the assistance in all these visuals by a doctoral graduate student from Purdue who had an instructor, Jim Munguski, is that what he pronounced it? He really corrected who was JPL when I first did some things over 20 years ago involving a strategy of going to Mars. And I tried with a number of people to get the NIAC contract to do some improving on this. Because, once you get something going, it's bound to be a better way. Unfortunately, we got turned down, and somebody won a way of just improving just what has become known as altered cycle. Because it came out in 1985, it was acknowledged very much, without a lot of detailed study, by the National Commission on Space. Most people think that has probably been one of the greatest overall summaries of the future. So, even though it goes back to 85, 86, historical value, I recommend you kind of get a look at that. Unfortunately, because of the time period of having committed just barely to the International it was the Freedom Space Station then, and we were in the early flights of the Space Shuttle, it was mandated that anything going to the moon or Mars, anywhere else, had to use the shuttle, had to use the station. So they sort of did that, but they had something else that they sort of used called, looked just like a station, it's called Earth Spaceport. And I think, rightly so, back in those days, we figured if we were going to go from one place to another, we would transition or transfer from space vehicles at spaceport. So we'd launch, go up to an Earth spaceport, transfer to another vehicle, go to a lunar spaceport, transfer to another vehicle. Then somehow we would, nobody suggested except the president in office right now that maybe the way to get to Mars is by the evening to move to go to Mars. I had to correct him on that. It's like misunderstanding. Obviously, to get to Mars, you're going to leave in the most efficient way from Earth, and you're not going to monkey around with crew time, probably, because it's going to take a while to get there. Now, one of the things I really want to get to before I finish is why the hell I'm wearing this beard. Don't get that out of the way. No. Okay. I'm a gray beard. We all know what a gray beard is. It's a retired guy who's very sage and aware and wise. Doesn't play golf. So he's got a lot of time to think about what somebody else ought to be doing to make things better. And he can be just an engineer who's had a lot of experience, a manager, rocket scientist, or whatever. Now, when you red team a new proposal by a company or the Air Force or NASA, you bring in contemporary guys to tell what's good or what's not so good about your trial proposal. But to see whether it really makes sense, you call in the graybeards. They don't really have to have graybeards. But just to make a point, I decided to do this again for the hell of it. And it's created a hell of a domestic problem. Unfortunately, my wife has a birthday coming up on the 2nd of November. So whether I really hate going diving in Maui, putting on a mask over this, or whether when I go skiing in Sun Valley or somewhere else and hate to have icicles, I probably, you're not going to see this very long. However, the problem is that there is a wonderful documentary that has been won a prize at the Sundance Film Festival, and it's called In the Shadow of the Moon. And In the Shadow of the Moon is going to premiere around the country next Friday. We have a big premiere screening in New York, and there's going to be a lot of publicity. And who was it that just had some heated discussions with Matt Lauer on Today? You don't watch the Today Show? I don't either. But I'm going to appear on there, I think, Wednesday morning. Somebody just... Who?
Tom Cruise. The actor, Tom Cruise.
No. It was somebody else, just very recently. Anyway, I'm sure Matt and I don't share the same points of view about a number of things that the country's doing. But hopefully he won't throw me off with the gray beard and do other things. And I won't get into too much trouble. The idea is to promote In the Shadow of the Moon. And it's got a bunch of old guys who kicked up moon dust and a few others who supported us. And the way the thing is produced, you know, they really come in close. You can see every defect, every little pimple and gray wrinkles and guys. But I've never heard Mike Collins so humorously erudite. It's really great, and I think it's going to be very popular. The people from the UK that put it together had about 2 days that they wanted with people, and I was kind of busy, so I only gave them a half a day. So I'm not that specialized in this. But there is another one coming out that's going to be kind of complimentary. Incidentally, this was so good that without having a damn thing to do with the production, Ron Howard, with a red beard, said, I'd like to endorse this and help you distribute. So his name is on there, but they don't have anyone yet on the name of The Wonder of It All. And this was produced by some people, and it's like a little different. It's got some of the same guys on it, but hopefully, I don't think Tom Hanks will want to compete with Ron Howard by endorsing this or helping in the distribution. But that will be coming out at some time in the future. Now, I want to tell you basically what I'm doing these days. And one of the most important things is what I feel is the most critical thing facing the nation, and that's the gap between retiring the orbiter and when Orion and Ares are able to begin to transport people to the space station. Otherwise, we rely on the 3-person Soyuz for COTS. And I will be announcing, I hope shortly, joining the number 3 COTS team, which we hope will gather up the leftovers from RPK if they're not able to meet their financial milestones. And anyway, there are a number of private investors that I have in mind that I feel are going to be very supportive of what I think this spacecraft can be. And it's a spacecraft based on the HL-20 that originally was a Bohr 4 over 20 years ago at subscale. The Russians flew it a couple times, I understand, and it landed in the Pacific, and the Australians photographed it while the Russians were picking it up. And that gave us the data to back engineer it, and we studied the HL-20 8 to 10 years at Langley, and 800 to $1 billion. Where NASA decided not to go in that direction. That was in the era of the personnel launch system. At the time, I really favored the Biconic that Boeing was looking at, because I thought it had a nice feature of variable geometry where you could fold out wings after it was subsonic in reentry. But it looks like maybe this one can do that too. My group of engineers gathered together somebody who'd worked on this at Langley, and we looked at a number of things. And rather than dwelling on it, we prepared a proposal with COTS by working with Raytheon and their business jet people in Wichita, because a great pressure vessel could be the Hawker Horizon or Hawker 4000. Pressure vessel, the front end of the fuselage, is a composite, and we can just build a spacecraft around that and launch it on an Atlas V. Well, unfortunately, the higher management decided to no bid. And we found out why, because they were getting ready to sell off Wichita, Beechcraft, and Hawker, which they had done. So we were left hanging dry, and I saw that one of the COTS teams, or whatever, was picking up the HL-20 as a potential suborbital and then orbital. And a reorganization of space dev resulted in Jim Benson, the founder, moving away and forming Benson Space Company with a design that's a conglomerate of a few aerodynamic vehicles, aircraft, and concentrating on suborbital. However, Space Dev, under the new management and board of directors under Mark Sarangelo, is moving toward Atlas V, just like we did. And they've got United Launch Alliance studying the man rating of that. And man, I think that at the time, this is the best potential for the U.S. to offer a common universal spacecraft for delivery to low Earth orbit and beyond, and land on a runway. And it is so important to me because I've got a briefing guide in here. I forgot to put on my hat. I've got a briefing guide in here of the, you guys up front can tell what it says. What does it say? On to Mars. Right. You better get on to Mars.
Bravo.
The Germans and EADS have briefing charts from Roscosmos working on an upgrade of Soyuz to 4 or highly desirable 6-person Soyuz out of Kourou. Now, we put our space station at 51.6 to accommodate the Russian launch out of Baikonur. Of course, they're finding it inefficient to launch out of Baikonur, so they're going to lean on the French and negotiate a split. And anyway, the French are building a Soyuz launch facility in Kourou, and that's where the Russians would like to do this. And let me tell you, if that happens, you can kiss goodbye U.S. dominance in low Earth orbit. You're not going to do it with Orion, and And there's nothing else that I see that can compete with a Russian rocket that's been flown so many times in a basic spacecraft that is upgraded and now financed by the Europeans. So I've been sort of campaigning at the Paris Air Show and others, and Mark shares the same point of view as I do, that this spacecraft, HL-20, needs to be international, common, universal, globally produced. It ranges in size, a little smaller, a little larger, but it keeps the basic tested aerodynamic testing of the Langley work. So much for that. That's very important. That's primary in my mind. The other thing that I'm working on with my Share Space Foundation is coming to fruition. There are 3 E's. Experiences, space flight activities, and bottom on up, exploration. What did we get out of exploration in the past? What do we hope to get out of exploration in the future? And education. Now, I'm putting education sort of in the background, but we're going to pioneer some things with the California Space Authority within the state of California. Then we're going to hopefully get Virginia along with the Virginia Space Authority, and then spread it throughout the country. Now, in the experiences, this involves the word that I heard about, maybe 8 years ago, when we're struggling to see, geez, if we could maybe put somebody in the shuttle or do something to get people up. I don't go into Kitchener's decision as to who ought to fly in the shuttle. And I heard the word lottery. Man, that made a lot of sense to me. This is going to be hellaciously expensive for private citizens to ever get a ride suborbital or into orbit. And into orbit is where you really want to be. I don't want to call it a stunt because it does, according to the French, suborbital does go into space. At least it's black and you can see a little curvature and you can float around for a while, but at 62 miles, nothing will stay in orbit at that altitude. You got to go back twice as high, and instead of 30 miles an hour or 1,000, you got to go 17,000 miles an hour to stay in orbit. So suborbital's got a long way to go, but it's a gap filler of interest, and it certainly is well worth supporting because some of the things we learned there are going to be applicable to orbital flight. But if we give it to the Russians or the Chinese by having too expensive an exploration vehicle that really can't afford to be commercialized in any way,